I'm excited to be here and sharing this topic with you all. Um, I'm originally from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and currently I'm based in Austin, Texas. One fun fact, so outside of doing UX design, I read and research a lot about airplanes in general. So you can see, I have an illustration here of paper planes. Yeah, and so let's dive in. So throughout my design journey so far, around nine years, I had the opportunity to work at 3 different environments, from agency, a very small agency, to a startup, and currently at a high growth and mature organizations. So that gave me the opportunity to grow as a designer, and I see opportunities and challenges in all of these 3 environments. So I want to go through each one of them and share with you my learnings. Hopefully, if you are considering transitioning to UX design, and as you're applying for CEO application, you know what to expect, right, for each one of these categories of environment. So let's start out with design agency. The order that I'm going through, it's just my chronological order as I grew in my career. There's no preference one over the others. So just a note. So I went to school undergraduate for graphic design. So I wasn't trained in UX at all. Mostly I was working on visual like design mostly print. So very new to UX. So when I started out as an intern at this small agency called The Lift, and I want to give you like a quick snapshot of the agency so that you kind of get a flavor of what a design agency means. So this is a smaller design agency. This is like a local agency. There could be big agency like national agencies or even global agency. I'm not familiar with that, but but that's a different experience for this. This is a smaller one, less than 15 people, and usually there's like business partners, design engineers, project managers, to work with different clients and admins. So the first 3 months I was an intern. And then I transitioned to a full-time UX UI designers. So the type of clients, we try at all times, we try to balance between having a large client. So I was in San Diego, and so we work a lot with Sony and Qualcomm. And then we also try to work on innovative concept with startups across the US. So on the right-hand side, you can see there's like a variety of companies we worked with. The most interesting thing for me about this journey is the different type of medium that I got exposed to. So I worked, on web design, mobile design, and then also some interactive design like kiosks or audio or demo, in electronic store like Best Buy, and then also try to touch on some smart devices concept. So just variety of interaction design there. So that's like a snapshot. What are some of the key learnings that I have there? So the first one for me is really important, and especially for me who just came out fresh out of school, I got the opportunity to expose to a wide variety of design medium, right? So like you saw on the last slide, coming from print design, now I got to touch on like what does it mean to design a website or a mobile, versus something more interactive like a shopping kiosk. So when you work with an agency, I'd say every 3 to 6 months, you work with one client on one project and then you move on. So that gives you over the years, you got exposed to a lot of interesting problem spaces. So besides the medium, you also learn about different industries. So among the clients that we worked with, I got to know a little bit more about financial industry, and then also healthcare and then entertainment. So every time that you work on a project, you gain information in that space. So that to me, early in my career, that was very helpful to gauge what I like to do later on in my career. This one is not really particular to agency, but as a recent graduate, working at agency, I started doing very small tasks. And I'm sharing this because if you happen to find yourself in this type of scenario, it's not because you're not trusted enough to do the whole full end-to-end process design at the beginning. So for me, I started out doing a lot of like documentations of design, design spec asset creation, handing off to developers, and then do some QA on the side. But doing those things for the first 6 months or so really helped prepare me for, for a more kind of end-to-end design process later on. And I learned a lot, mostly through mentorship and doing. So I was lucky enough that the senior designer there, even though he was very small, they're willing to teach me, and I'm willing to take on information and knowledge. So I asked a lot of questions, and I try to seek feedback as much as I could. When I work on design thinking, even research, so that I can apply it to my projects. So definitely, if you're working for if you're joining a small company, don't think of it as a disadvantage, because sometimes smaller company, you do have the opportunity to establish relationships, right? That can help with your career growth later on. Two challenges. So for every environment, I'll talk about opportunities and challenges. So the first one for me is it's hard to measure design impact and iterate. So I can talk. So once you finish your design project, and let's say even the developers built it out, you hand it off to the client, and oftentimes you don't know what happens to it next, right? The client might decide to launch it, or they just put it in a cabinet somewhere, or like they don't have to tell you what happens to it. So for you as a designer, when you put together a portfolio, it could be challenging. So it happened to me when I interviewed for Atlassian. I remember like I don't have numbers. So, but I think that's a challenge. But there's a few ways you can go around it. Maybe you can find an online article that maybe talked about it. Sometimes clients can share with you, but it's really rare. So not to say that there's no way around sharing impact, but this is a challenge, right? Like when you hand it off, you don't know. So just something to keep in mind. Lack of learning resources. So I think this is not as surprising. More mature company will have more learning resources. But again, for this small agency, I learned mostly from doing, and also from the people, right? From the more senior designers. So with all of the I guess pros and cons, opportunities and challenges, ask yourself this question: at this point in your career, right? Are you highly interested in going broad to explore different design medium and learn about different industries, products, and services? If this is what you want to focus on this point in your career, then agency might be the right choice. And I emphasize at this point in your career because not one of these options are better than the other. It just really like in this point in your career growth, which one makes most sense to you? Because I see designer going back and forth among these three. Even a very senior person might jump to an agency or startup, right? So ask yourself a question. It's have to be relative to your journey. Okay, so let's move on to the startup. I think at the end of the presentation, I can take some questions. So I'll keep going. So the agency I work, one of our startup clients for the Lyft, which is the last agency I talked about, actually decided to acquire us because they want to grow the design. So they brought the whole team in-house. So that was my beginning journey with working with a startup. So with me was the startup name. It grew to Series A. It grew really fast from 20 to 50 people across software and hardware. So my role was a mid-level UX UI designers. Later on in my time there, I led some projects. This is where I started working more closely with the PM, product managers and engineers, because we started working on agile developments. And so it's very important to work closely. The type of products we built was mostly e-commerce websites. And then later on, we also explore kiosk, self-checkout, like shopping kiosks, like you see on the right-hand side, some mobile apps, and also some concepts around like automated vending machines. So on the right side here, it's just a shopping kiosk that I helped design. And in the background photo, that was me sort of like coming out on the launch event in Chicago a few years ago. And when it's launched, everyone just came out and helped out. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. So just kind of give you like a quick snapshot of a small kind of startup setup. So key learnings. The first one, I think you might have seen this in, I don't know, media, and you read online from others people. But for me, yeah, I think it's all about like speed and chaos. So you just have to accept it, right? Like you don't know what's gonna happen next, and there's a lot of like changes happening, and things are moving fast. But that's the nature of a startup. It could be exciting too. if you find the right one. So I think, in a way, embrace it. Of course, to a level of your comfort. If it's like stressing you out and you losing work-life balance, and then at that point, it's not a good fit anymore. For designer, for me, for designers, what this means is that because startup run really fast and oftentimes there's not enough resources, you don't get to follow the design process 100% all the time, right? So in school, in the hopefully in this program, you learn about all of the steps of design. But in a startup environment, oftentimes you don't get the time and the support to do all of that. So you need to find creative ways to go about that. For instance, research. In my time there, we didn't have researcher, we didn't have a lot of support for research. So, I got creative by talking to the customer support team to understand how our customers are doing certain tasks, what problems they were having, and they were able to share with me, right? So that's like zero cost. And I was able to find what I need. Not perfect, but there are some ways that you can go around it. Which led me to the next one is all like championing for design anywhere, anytime. It's one of my favorite things, but in reflection, it was a painful experience at first. So at the startup, right, not everyone understands the role of design, the role of UX design. People think they know design in general, but oftentimes they're not correct about it. So it was my job to be patient and really help educate my stakeholders and partners around why we need to do certain things in the design process. Why need we do research? Why need we make sure that whatever visual design that we were planning, we need to ship exactly like that. Like not something, not slightly different, right? It took a lot of time to do that, but once you can help educate your partners, then you start seeing improvement in the product quality. And at the end, right, customer happier and business getting more revenue. So it's a constant thing. At the more mature company, more people understand the role of design, so you do less. You still championing, but I think the level of championing is a bit less compared to a more like smaller startups. Wearing multiple hats. So at least in my experience, normal time, not so much, but during crunch time, launch time, it's expected that, besides doing design, we can help out with other tasks. So in the photo I showed earlier, like during the 2 weeks leading to the launch, I helped out QA, the software and hardware. I even stay in the inventory and count certain items. So because, resources always not a luxury at a startup. So if it's needed, then all hands on deck and, you help out as much as you can. But make sure though, it's not the norm, right? If you do that often, then that's the wrong expectation. And on the positive side, like by putting on different hats, it kind of helped me gain the empathy for the internal users. So if you designing internal apps for other employees, then you feel their pain, or you feel, you basically walk their shoes, and that helps with the design process. 2 challenges. So again, lack of learning resources. If the startup gets to a very like a more mature level, then there will be more documented resources for you to learn from. But oftentimes, startup similar to agency, you learn by doing. Like you just take on a new projects, your boss can give you new projects, and you just learn your ways around it and try it, and then maybe fail and learn again. But as you grow more seniors, then try to document the knowledge yourself. And hopefully share that with others. And that's how, bigger companies start building their libraries of resources. I spoke a little bit about this earlier, all right, but the uncertainty natures is always there for startups. The business as a whole might stop tomorrow, or it might take up and become the next unicorn. Like, the spectrum is really broad. When it comes to design, what it means is that every time you design something, you don't know what to expect for the outcome. So it could ship as an MVP and then make it out there and become, the next Uber, Airbnb. Or you might design something and it makes to MVP and then that's it. That's the end of it. Or sometimes you design something and it always make it to the presentation, the investor presentation, and that's it, right? So don't expect like a normal outcomes every single time for when you work on a problem. So with all of that, it's one career. Are you highly interested in a fast-paced environment, learning by doing? Okay, putting on different hats. And I threw in a bonus here. Do you care deeply enough about a startup vision? If the answer is yes, then maybe startup is a right place for you to start. I threw in the care deeply because even if the first few don't check your boxes, but you're really passionate about problem space, and then there's a startup out there that's solving it, and you want to be a part of it. I would say go for it. You might not grow so much as a designer, but you're doing what you really care about. And if not, that's not for you after a few years, you can always switch to the other environment. So just something to think about there. Okay, so we got to the last environment, which is the more high growth, mature organizations. So I joined Atlassian 5 years ago. So a little bit about the company. So Atlassian, we build collaboration products and teamwork best practices. So the products that most commonly known for is Jira, Confluence, Trello, along with about 10 other products. The company actually started in Australia, Sydney, Australia, and we just celebrated our 20th anniversary this year. So it's been growing really fast in the past few years, from like 2,000 to 8,000 people. So it's really like every week I see new joiners. And that means more teams are forming over the last few years that I'm here. We are global, and since after COVID, the company made it permanent that we want to adopt a hybrid remote environment. So by default, you are remote, and then if you happen to be in one of the main cities, like San Francisco, Sydney, or Austin, or New York, then you can come into the office if you want. So I joined as a mid-level, and then grew to senior designers. My team look after the whole end-to-end buying journey. So, from the moment when a company needs to look for a better software for collaboration, research about it, try it, buys it, and then later on adds on more, plugins and it adopts other tools. And then here are some of the key projects that I worked on, envisioning the web experience, building experience, etc. So key learnings, when should I keep track of time? So there are 4 key learnings I want to share. It is sort of a more mature org. The first one is communication. So this could be a very broad topic, but I want to be I want to give more clear examples. So at the bigger company, there's a lot of opportunity for you to communicate your design. So whether you presenting to your stakeholders, you presenting to your fellow designers, right, in the critique, whether you trying to influence the decisions as you get more senior, or writing, just documenting your design. There's so much communication that goes on. I remember when I joined, I was like, wow, I spent a lot of time just like working on communication skill, and so I did get the support to get better at it, but it's a constant learning thing for me. So that's number one. And then research. So compared to agency and startup, there's way more resources for research in a more mature company. You have there's a team, there's a dedicated team, so you can get help if you need, but also there's a lot of resources. So if I need to run on a study on my own, and I do have the tools and the documentation to follow, it makes it easier every single project to include research. Also data, like at the more mature company, there's more data for you to access, which helps with the design decision making process. Versus at a startup, there's not a lot of data because we're still trying to get more customers. So you have to kind of go around and find, the best piece of data. But at the more mature company, but probably sometimes opposite, like there's so much data that you need to know where to go to find the right piece of insight. Focus. So at in a bigger company, each team and each individual will focus on a particular set of features or customer journeys. So because of that, you do have more time to dig into a problem and come up and have the time to come up with ideas and then design something and then iterate multiple versions. So you spend a little bit more time on on a particular problem space. Not always, but generally speaking, compared to startup or agency, like where you move really fast and you're trying to do all the things, you do have to focus when you join a larger company. And then career growth. So similar to all of the resources that I talked about earlier, usually at this company, there's a lot of opportunities for you to grow your career with working with your managers, right? And there's documentations and there's different roles within a team or different within a company that you can move around to make sure that you can grow the way that you would like it to be. So definitely a big opportunity there as well. It doesn't, of course, it comes with all its own challenges. Bigger companies. I would say my experience shipping project is way slower. And I think the fundamental reason is because the design have to go through several layers of, review and approvals, just to make sure that the final products, right, it meets all the requirements. Because bigger companies produce products that are used by million or, like thousands and million of users. So we want to make sure that every changes, every design that we put out there have to meet the bar and therefore explain the longer duration project. So, if you come from a startup, it could feel slow to you. Another thing that I've seen, especially in a fast-growing company, is that when so many teams start emerging, then you have communication problems. And so when teams don't talk to each other, the customer are the one who get hurt the most, because now you have all of these disconnected journeys. So if I'm trying to go through the whole experience, and then I see some gaps in experience, like there's like a glitch or there's like a inconsistency. Usually the problem is like teams within a company don't talk to each other. So just be aware of this and constantly, making sure that you understand what is the end-to-end journey, how is the user feeling when they go through the whole thing, and making sure that you talk to other teams. So that's another challenge I see with more larger companies. So with large company, are you highly interested in learning from community designers and other professionals? Also having access to abundant knowledge resources, and then making an impact on a much larger scale. So that's a question I would pose for this. So with all of the things I just share, I just want to say that each environment has its own opportunities and challenges. So it's really up to you to decide, like, right now in any point in your career, which one makes the most sense, and what makes you excited the most, and you go for it, and you can always experiment and try different things. Thank you very much, and I think I'll pause there for, I guess, questions.
Great, thank you, Hieu. That was excellent. Such a good such a good insight. Especially for those of you thinking about what types of roles to apply for, to give some thought to the types of environment that you want to be working in. Are you interested in that fast-paced startup environment? If you can get access to a high-growth, mature organizations, can be incredible mentorship, support from a very large professional network of designers. So there's different qualities from all of these types of organizations. So this presentation was included to give you some insight into what to think about. So I'm just going to field a few questions and then we'll move on to the next. We'll have a lot more time at the end of the presentations to go through all of your questions. So hang tight until then. But I have just one question here from Natasha. This is directed to Hieu. Just wanted to ask, did you come from a creative background, and how did you become interested in UX UI design?
Thank you for the question. So I did come from a creative background, studying graphic design. I would say when I joined this agency, right, I mentioned earlier, at the time I would just want to get a job in design, to be fair. And so when I saw the website, I saw some really interesting, projects, and I got accepted. So I think in the first few months, observing, how other designers operate, and actually getting my feet wet with some of the thinking process behind my design decisions. I started getting more interested in UX, right? Like, I think I started asking myself, like, why do I make this design decisions? Like, is it serving, like, how is it serving the users? So it's partly me being curious, but also like the more senior designer start to help me with like the thinking, like, have you thought about this, right? Like, do you want to do some research? So I think at that point, it sparked an early interest of like, oh, okay, wow, there's a whole profession in this. And by doing that, I'm still keeping my creative skills, but also I can build on top of it. And so from there on, I got really into it, and think project after project, I tried to become, a proper UX designer.
Thanks, Hugh. Next question is from Neil, who asks, while working at Atlassian, Hugh, you mentioned that you worked on future web experiences. What did that feel like, and how did you approach working on novel products?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I'm still working on that project. It's been a year-long project. So for me, working on so before I started project, most of the project I worked with was more like it's going to ship, like it's going to be near term, right? We're going to work on a very specific problem space, and then we're going to ship, and then iterate. So this project was the first time that I got to work on like an envisioning project. So I think the key, to keep my answer short, I think the greatest opportunity for me in working on that space, in that type of project, is that you had a higher visibility into a lot of like the moving parts of, I guess, the business, right? Because in order to envision, you need to know like what are some of the fundamental pain points that we're experiencing. And then I think another exciting part is you have the opportunity and support from everyone to think bold, right? I can envision like even like a crazy version and go as far as I can, and then we will bring it back. And from doing all that, then we can find real opportunities that we can experiment with, and then hopefully design and ship. So yeah, and one challenge I would say is that sometimes it could feel like very abstract at times, because you work on some futuristic. So sometimes whenever I feel that sense of challenge, I'll seek advice from my managers and other folks in the team to kind of bring myself back to the reality.
Great, thank you, Hugh. Next question is from Thena, who asks, would you work for another startup again after working for a large company?
Yeah, I would. And I love that question, because throughout my time, it depends on where I was in, again, back to like where it depends on where you are in the journey. If you ask me the first 2 or 3 years at Atlassian, probably I would say no, because at that time I was still, embracing, because I just came from a startup. So I was embracing this new mature organization with all of the things I could learn. But I think in the next few years, maybe when I learn enough, I guess, that there will be never enough learning. But let's just say when I meet a certain person, and there's a startup out there that's starting something that I'm really interested in, whether it's the space or maybe it's just the role, I think I'll say yes to it. So yeah, good question.
Thanks, Hugh. Faye asks, what type of education resources did you utilize when you moved from print design to UX UI?
Try to remember. It's been a while. So luckily a lot of the things, well, that was a while ago, but even back then there was a lot of online resources. Nowadays, absolutely, like there's a lot of designers, sharing their experience on YouTube, but you can find Coursera and other online educations. For me, at the time, one of the early learning materials for me was from the more senior folks. So they would share with me like books to read, and I'm happy to share some links on books later. But constant feedback, I think that's the key. So I let's just say I work on a flow, and then in the weekly critique, I'll get all of the feedback, and then in the feedback they will provide some sort of like knowledge in there, and then I go look them up, and then I sort of connect the dots. So just a lot of learning through that way, and not until later on at Atlassian that I actually got proper learning materials.
Awesome, thank you, Hugh. We'll just take one more question before we move to the next presentation, and then for the rest, we'll get to you at the end. So next question is, since you came from a design background, did you learn about any coding to build websites, to improve your UX UI, or were you just comfortable liaising with web developers and IT who knew coding?
Yeah, I hear this question a lot too. So in school, I remember when I was studying print, I did take two web design basic classes like HTML, CSS. So it definitely useful knowledge. Later in my career, I did not code a lot, but what that knowledge helped me was that when I work with developers when handing out design or when I do QA, I can speak the language a little bit, right? So the more overlapped, the more common in your language with your partners, whether it's business or developers, the better the outcome will be. So if I can speak the language they can understand, then it's more likely that they will help fix the things. So definitely, you don't. I think modern designers, some companies might be different from others, but you don't have to code, but knowing the basics, the fundamentals, and keeping up with the latest, language, I think is very, very, very useful.
Awesome. Thank you, Hieu.